They might just be the biggest gig economy company that you've never heard of, or maybe you have heard of them. Well, today we've got Aaron Hoffman, CEO of DeliverThat, joining us. Well, hello, Courier Nation. Welcome to the Deliver on Your Business podcast, where you are the boss. We are all about encouraging you and equipping you to take control of your business as an independent contractor in the gig economy when you're working with apps like Doordash, Grubhub, Uber Eats, Instacart, Uber, Lyft, and all of these other little guys. It's all about helping you to be the boss. Well, hey, my friends. I really enjoyed the opportunity this week to visit with Aaron Hoffman of DeliverThat. And they may be that one food delivery platform that is maybe in more markets than just about anybody except for DoorDash, Uber Eats, or Grubhub. You know, they could be that number 4, except for they're not the same type of platform as those companies. You know, they deal almost exclusively with catering. They do a little bit of grocery, or they're branching out into some packaged stuff, but the main thing is catering orders. And so my experience with them really so far, I have been delivering for them for a few months, just off and on, and it's been positive for the most part. I haven't had any major complaints on any deliveries. I haven't had any real stinkers. And I'll be writing a review or two coming up here in the next couple of weeks, just about my experience with them. But for right now, we'll get into the interview. And then at the end, I'll just share some of my brief thoughts and a few of my opinions, what I like about them. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the issues that I feel are out there. I'll mention a couple of those at the end. But for right now, let's dive into the interview with Aaron. Well, hey, my friends, I'm excited to have a special guest on with us this week. And, you know, just to kind of lay the background here. When I started out doing deliveries, you know, one of the perks of like accepting everything with Grubhub was they said, well, you'll get an option at more of the larger deliveries. So basically you had to have a real high acceptance rate to be able to get some of those deliveries. And then it turned out they never gave you those anyway. And every once in a while I hear from people that love, like on DoorDash, some of their drive orders, but again, you have to jump through so many hoops. And here in my market, I've got, I discovered, and actually I understand they're in a lot of markets, came across DeliverThat. And they tended to do a lot of delivery orders. Hey guys, this is just an obvious edit that I'm throwing in here real quick because I just realized this didn't make any sense, what I just said, but it was actually that they tended to do a lot of catering orders. Now I'll let you get back to the episode as it was. And as I took a look, and all of a sudden I realized, man, these guys are all over the place. And the offers that I've done a number of deliveries. I've been trying to kind of focus a little bit more on doing some more deliveries so I can write some more about it. And it's just like, okay, this is an option people need to know about. These guys are all over the place. And as much as I'd love to see somebody come along and compete with Grubhub and DoorDash and some of these others and stuff like that, I'm always love the opportunity to visit with folks about what they're doing. And so I am real glad to have Aaron on from DeliverThat. Aaron, I'll just turn it over to you and tell us, I guess, kind of maybe the elevator pitch for DeliverThat, what you do, and maybe how you got started with all of this.
Sure. Hey, Ron, first off, thank you, for having me on your show to talk about delivery. And, thank you, obviously, for being a part of the DeliverThat family.
Sure.
I started this business in my dorm room when I was 19 with my best friend. So before I can give you even the elevator pitch, you should probably learn a little bit, history about myself and how the company was actually founded.
I'd love to hear it. Yeah. Especially that story right away. Yeah. I mean, and that resonates. Every once in a while you hear people talk, maybe we should start our own delivery company, and you start, okay, is that reasonable? But man, there you did it.
I couldn't even tell you how many times I've heard, you took my idea. I mean, everyone's got this idea to deliver food. So, I was 19. I was a pre-med student at Ohio University. Fortunately, my best friend and I went to school together. And, yeah, we just started delivering college kids basically anything: Chipotle, textbooks, I don't know, like homework to their classrooms. I mean, you name it, we delivered it. Not alcohol, obviously, but it was very lucrative, and it was a good way to pay for school. When I was in school.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So we started that. We started at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. For anyone who knows where that's at, it's in the middle of nowhere. It's a college town. And we expanded. We went to Ohio State University in Columbus. We did Kent State University, Miami University of Ohio. And it was awesome. But that would have been back between 2013 and 2016. So I graduated school in 16 and moved back to Canton, Ohio. Following graduation, really wanted to keep pursuing this, this dream of mine to have a delivery company, that could compete with DoorDash, Uber Eats, and those guys. And what I found out very quickly, very, very, very quickly, is that, in order to compete with those guys, one, you have to be a tech company, which we are not. Two, you have to have unlimited funding to basically, fund any initiative that you want to get into, whether you want to do a land grab, offer free delivery, you name it. So I went into a local restaurant with John, that's the other founder, and we were pitching the GM there or whoever it was and said, hey, we'll do your deliveries for you. Just sign up. We'll do all your on-demand deliveries, all your takeout, all that stuff. And the guy's like, don't need it. We're already on DoorDash, Grubhub, you name it. I mean, you've probably delivered on all the platforms. You know what that's like. They got the signs everywhere. You blue, so instant no. But we saw that there were orders, like large orders, sitting on tables. And the GM looked at me and said, hey, man, would you deliver catering food? And at the time, I mean, I had no interest in doing that. But I said, what the heck? Let's try it. So John and I got our first taste of delivering catering. This would have been at the end of 16, early 17. And we found that, wow, we delivered $200 of food to a hospital. We were polite. We were dressed professionally. We looked good. We set the food up just like the customer had asked for. And him and I must have got a $40 or $50 tip, in cash on spot. And right there, a light bulb went on. We're like, holy crap, that wasn't even that hard. How can we take what we just did and scale it, all across Canton, Ohio, all across Northeast Ohio, then all of Ohio, and then keep expanding from there. And that's how this company was born. So, our motto is, by drivers for drivers. I mean, when I say that I've delivered 1,000 caterings, I mean that I've delivered 1,000, individual catering orders. So I know what it's like to be a driver. Everyone in our company has delivered catering orders. We are a company that is built around, the driver mentality. So
you're not the CEO that sits up in the tower and then for 2 hours goes out and does some deliveries and tweets about it. We won't name any names or anything like that. You've actually been there and done that.
I still take deliveries. Do I need to? No. Do I enjoy it? Absolutely. And I think I think that there needs one thing we're trying to do as a company is change the perception, the way delivery drivers are viewed. Typically, like, for example, I'll go into a building. No one knows who I am. No one knows, what I'm doing. I just have a shirt on, a logo, and I'm carrying your food. And oftentimes, I'm not treated with the most respect. And that's what we're trying to solve there. So we're trying to be the most driver-centric platform that's available today. And we're not trying to take down Uber or DoorDash we're not trying to take anybody down. Right. We're trying to play alongside them and just make sure that our main asset, which is our drivers, they're taken care of at every turn. That's why we have a U.S. call center based in Canton, Ohio. You can call a live hotline and get answers immediately. You have, as a driver, you have your own account rep you can call and talk to. We really, like I said, we pay, in my opinion, our compensation model for drivers is second to none. Our support team, we support our drivers at every chance we can. So, a lot of these things have been put in place because, when we founded the company, we were delivery drivers. We didn't, we didn't find it. We didn't found the company in Silicon Valley,
right. Right.
So we're Midwest guys, Midwest hardworking guys.
Yep.
And the company has grown substantially to where we've got, 40 some full-time employees now,
And that's something that I can say I noticed just right away when I started delivering was it was like there's real people on the other end of the line. With so many of the others, it's all done by algorithm. And if you got a problem, you submit it to, you're either going to get somebody in an overseas call center or you're going to, it's something that's all kind of
so many barriers put up in place to keep you off the phone and keep.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. The whole model is built around having as few man hours involved with the interaction with the customers, with the drivers, with anybody. And, and it's something that it can work, but it can be frustrating when when you run into those odd situations and everything like that. And when it started, first time I delivered for you, here's all of a sudden there's, I'm getting actual text from actual people instead of, just a robot type of thing. And, there was one big order that I took on, and, as I'm on the way, just, somebody called me and said, "Hey, how's it going? What do you think? Is there anything you'll need any help with on this?" Or something like that. And it just blew me away because it's the absolute opposite of what I've come to expect, in gig economy. So that was something that I really appreciated right away with you guys.
Yeah. And thank you for that. Thank you for that. And there are some people out there that would prefer to not get contacted. They would prefer to drive on the platform where you're literally just, accepting, and there aren't humans involved at all. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But what we're trying to do is give a voice to the common person, the common driver, make them feel like they're not just a number in a company, that they're, part of a team, they're part of a family. And that's what we're trying to instill in our fleet.
Yeah. Yeah. How does that work for you guys? I mean, as far as, because a lot of the reason I know behind this model for so many companies is profitability, that labor is such an expensive cost. Does that become a problem that you run into, or are you able to stay profitable in spite of, being able to provide kind of really that extra service both to the drivers and to the customers?
Yeah. So without going into too much details about our financials, we've been lucky. We've been very lucky and very fortunate. We made it through COVID. We didn't have any layoffs with our employees, which is great. No COVID related layoffs.
Right.
We didn't reduce anybody's pay. In fact, drivers are now making more. Customers are tipping more. We changed the way our driver compensation model works. We added new initiatives like the delivering more bonus, to where if you hit certain milestones, you get bonused every single quarter. We're able to provide more jobs in a more frequent capacity to drivers. So like the one metric we look at is orders per driver, and that has gone up significantly over time, which tells us that, hey, the average driver is taking more and more and more deliveries, which equates to more money.
Sure.
So labor for us, no, it's not an issue whatsoever. It hasn't been an issue. And I truly believe it's because we have built this driver-centric platform to where drivers are going to go the extra mile for us because we go the extra mile for them. We truly view it as a partnership with these individuals, these contractors, that, in order for us to be successful, we've got to make sure you're being successful as well.
Sure. I hadn't thought about this before, what you just mentioned with the pandemic. And I would imagine, did that hit you differently than a lot of the other places? Because everybody else, blew up with one-off deliveries because everybody's delivering from home. But because you rely on catering more, did that slow you down at times?
Oh yeah. Our volume went down, significantly overnight in COVID. That was a nightmare. And, we had to be resilient. Like I said, we've been fortunate and very lucky. And we've obviously worked our way back. We're doing record numbers every single week now. Mm-hmm. We got through. We have a lean model. We have a very lean business model. We don't have developers or a lot of overhead that we have to worry about. So, the main thing was keeping our fleet alive, making sure they're getting taken care of. And then from there, we knew business, was going to come back. But what COVID did for us was it forced us to think outside of the box. Prior to COVID, any new driver that came on board would have to go on a ride along, which basically is a shadowing of a delivery, live delivery. That's
Okay.
you can't do that anymore because of COVID. So we were able to put more money in our drivers' hands just by eliminating that entire process because that was an expense for us. Okay, so we launched this virtual onboarding process.
Okay. And I went
Another
through
way we
that.
did this is we were able to expand rapidly because before we had to travel into markets to launch them. Now we can launch a market in as little as a week. I mean, we're taking deliveries in Honolulu right now, and no one
Okay.
from our team's ever been there. So
Okay.
COVID, as bad as it's affected the world, as bad as it's affected business, as bad as it's affected, I mean, it's been terrible.
Right.
It's I still see the silver lining a little bit for us, how it made us a stronger company.
Did that maybe in some ways open up some catering opportunities? Some of the other companies do have their catering options, like I mentioned in introducing everything. The drive orders for DoorDash. But I kind of wonder if because all of a sudden their demand went through the roof for all the at-home deliveries, if that made it harder for them to fulfill some of the catering offers they had, or
Yeah, so our market share definitely went up in the industry, that's for sure.
mm-hmm.
The smaller players, the smaller players that relied on tech, had a lot of overhead. They just slowly went away, and they're struggling to come back. So we definitely expanded our market share because, like I said, we had a lean model and we were a driver-centric platform. We weren't a tech-centric platform. We don't rely on like you said, algorithms.
Right.
No, we rely on the people, more so than technology, which is it's a blessing and a curse because you need good technology to make the delivery experience better, but more importantly, you need good people.
Yeah.
People it's everything in this business. When you talk about hospitality, people.
Sure.
I preach that all day long.
Yeah, you tend to, you have a little higher standards as far as kind of what you expect on drivers. I remember noticing that you kind of, you're asking for at least at minimum, decent clothes, a polo, reasonable slacks or whatever, as opposed to a lot of platforms where it's kind of like you see everything. And
yeah,
and when you're dealing with a large volume of food and you get somebody coming in just like, looking like they haven't showered in a week or something like that, carrying your food, that can be a really bad customer experience.
you hit it right on the head. So two things on that. We don't require a certain dress code. That's not us.
Okay.
The clients that we work with, the restaurants and marketplaces, they have certain standards.
Sure.
And yeah, I'll piggyback off what you just said. Horrible experience if you go, just imagine delivering to a boardroom where, a CEO's there, whatever, and you show up in, sweatpants and a t-shirt, don't set the food up, provide a horrible experience, blah, blah, blah. You do a terrible job. This is something that we educate our drivers on. Like, listen, if you want to maximize your earnings, if you want to maximize the potential to earn a high gratuity, you need to be doing these things because this is what we see works. So, sure. Yeah, it's not OU delivery anymore. You're not delivering Chipotle to a college kid. Okay. You're delivering large quantities of food to professional settings typically.
Yeah. Now, one thing I noticed, like in the driver community, especially if you hang out in many driver groups or anything like that on Facebook, and of course you get all sorts of things on Facebook, but if some of those places, if you talked about, well, yeah, you should wear this, or you should dress up a little more, or you got to set up the food. And I know some places going to be like, no, I can't do that. Time is money. I need to move on to the next delivery or something like that. And so there's kind of a mindset out there. But what I see with you is kind of between I think one, the respect for the drivers, but two, the fact that, okay, there's a bigger picture of something that it's more than just a $5 delivery now that we're talking about, and that there's a value in providing that service, and a value, I think, in having that better appearance, better customer service, all of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we're a platform by drivers for drivers. Every single one of our employees in our company has taken countless catering deliveries, so we know the pain points and we know how to make money doing it. We know what's good, we know what's bad, and we try to reiterate that in the best of our abilities, to our fleet of drivers. That's why we have weekly driver tips of the week. We're launching a driver-centric podcast where we will be able to interview drivers about their delivery experiences, talk to them about what they like, what they dislike, their deliveries. I mean, we are a platform for drivers, sure. And yeah, I mean that's how we view it.
Yeah.
So, and at no point, I'll say this as well. So our average pay per delivery, is right around $30. Okay, that's what the average pay is one of our deliveries, and the average job takes, I'm not going to get technical here, but I'll say 45 minutes. It's actually less, but we'll say 45 minutes. Okay. DeliverThat is not the all-in-one solution for drivers out there for the gig economy.
Right.
We do not have enough jobs in a day to provide a full-time income to any individual. That's not what we're about. We're a platform that can supplement and be a great addition to your gig stack. So say, like you said, you might drive for Uber, DoorDash, Grubhub, XYZ, and you put us in the middle there. I bet you we perform dollar for dollar better than any other platform for the time you spend on our platform.
Yeah. And I would say that makes you actually more of a true gig economy platform, because I think when you get to the big three, I do think that I don't know that they ever actually say it, but you definitely get the feel that there's an expectation that you're going to deliver only for them, And so the idea is you keep delivering, we'll just say DoorDash to pick on them or something like that. You do DoorDash and they kind of want you to just keep doing DoorDash. And that's not a whole lot different when you take that approach than just being a job. But, my idea is you're running a business and you've got all of these companies that I always call you guys our customers, because you're the ones that we contract with. And so, why rely on just one source of income? And so I tend to, my approach generally is I'm going to go out and I'm going to turn on the different platforms, and whoever's going to pay me the best for the next delivery is going to be the one I'm going to deliver for. And that's really more like running a true business,
It really is.
And so I like that, that you recognize that really is kind of the way to do it, I think. And it's like,
yeah. I was going to say back to the philosophy by drivers for drivers.
Right.
When I was a driver, still am a driver, I'm gonna put the driver's best interest first. And I know that, hey, you drive with us between 10 and 12, and then you do your other gig platforms, you're going to maximize your earnings. You're going to have a better overall experience. We preach this to our fleet. We educate them on that.
Yeah. And one thing, I mean, we jumped ahead a little bit, but tell me about some of the different types of deliveries and the different platforms or something that you guys do deliveries for, so people have an idea of kind of what they're looking at when you get into a DeliverThat type of delivery or option. What kind of deliveries could they look forward to?
Yeah, so you're predominantly going to have pre-scheduled catering deliveries.
Okay.
And we deem pre-scheduled, obviously, in advance. We do take on-demand deliveries for caterings at time if we can fulfill them. Mm-hmm. There's route-based deliveries, there's grocery delivery, there's meal kit deliveries. We don't traditionally do the on-demand takeout, the small orders. It's not our bread and butter. We view our fleet as the cream of the crop. So in order to do a takeout small order, you don't need the best quality of driver to do that.
Right.
So we've sort of stayed away from that. We don't want to compete with DoorDash and Uber Eats and Grubhub for that market share. We're going for more of the professionalism, the customer service approach, and the drivers that can obviously, do that.
Sure. And it's, you kind of recognize the one thing that you guys do really well and focus on that. And so who are some of the platforms, I guess, because you guys tend to sometimes, well, maybe let me say it this way, to be able to launch in so many different markets. There's one side where you can go out and you can recruit restaurants. but that's probably harder to do kind of, you talked about a quick launch type of thing where you can go in now, you can launch in Honolulu without being there. Mm-hmm. And so I'm assuming that means you guys work with other platforms or something like that to make that work.
Yeah, so we've been fortunate enough to build strong partnerships with numerous marketplaces and numerous large restaurant brands.
Okay.
I'm talking about some of the biggest brands in the world that are on every street corner.
Okay.
So by leveraging those partnerships, we're able to, I guess, essentially, advertise for drivers, get the appropriate amount of drivers needed, and then launch and start taking these deliveries. And as long as they're outfitted and they've got the appropriate equipment and, they're onboarded, boom, we can start taking deliveries.
Okay.
So, and that process completely changed on how we launched markets due to COVID, as I talked about earlier.
Because you already had potential clients already lined up for the most part. It's kind of more like, oh man, if we can just get into.
But more importantly, like I said, we view our main customer. There's two customers really for us, okay, and they're both very, 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 very important. But you need one in order to make the other one happy. Okay, so we have two customers. We have the restaurants and marketplaces that we service, and that's they're providing us the deliveries. And then we have, in our opinion, what's more important is the drivers. You don't have the drivers, you cannot service the customer. So we view you guys as customers to us. We work for you guys. That's why, when I say we're a platform by drivers for drivers, I really do mean that. And you would, as we've continuously gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and we've got thousands upon thousands upon thousands of drivers on our platform. I mean, like thousands. Okay. And it's funny because as we've gotten bigger, man, do people like to hate. And I mean, personally, I've been attacked. I've been sent stuff. I mean, people don't even know who I am or what I'm about or what this company's about. And it's not just me. It's already, so as we've gotten bigger, we've been sort of targeted now as we've been targeted by people.
Yeah.
So getting our name out there and doing stuff like this and giving our story and what we're all about, this is a huge pro for us.
Sure. No. And cause I had never heard of you. And I remember and I'm always interested in, okay, what else is out there? What are the other options out there? And I don't even remember where I first heard of you. And so I had to look you up and it's like, oh, you're in Denver. Okay. I'm going to give you guys a try and stuff like that. So it was kind of like, and then after getting out there, it's like, okay, you guys are one of the better kept secrets out there. Which is always one of the deadliest things you could say, I guess, when you're trying to grow a business. But but I appreciate that you're willing to come on and talk with us, and we can let people know about, hey, here's another option. Tell us about where you're at. What kind of markets are you in, and where will generally people be able to deliver for you?
I'm telling you right now, if you're in a major city across the United States, that does not include Manhattan, we're there.
Okay.
I mean, we're there.
And we're not talking about Manhattan, Kansas.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
You might be. Okay.
Yeah. No. I mean, we're everywhere, man. Like, but I would say like our best states we deliver. I mean, if you go to DeliverThat.com, you can see a full list of all the metros we're in at the very bottom.
That was the thing that kind of amazed me.
And contrary to what a lot of the other big delivery companies do, we also service a lot of suburbs. So, for example, if you see Chicago on there, that doesn't just mean that, Chicago, the city. I mean, that's like a 50-mile radius around Chicago.
Okay.
So there's plenty of opportunities all around the country for anyone that wants to deliver, at a high capacity and be and not just be a number. But if for whatever reason you're in an area that I want to say, we had a driver recently that contacted us from Augusta, Georgia, and where that's where the Masters played at. They got basically nothing down there. But he asked us, hey, can you launch this market for me? And we're taking a look at that because again, we're a platform by drivers for drivers. So he must have known that there's catering opportunities. Sure enough, we launched the market. Just because we were able to get enough drivers down there, it made sense. So if there is an area that we're not in and we get an inquiry from a driver saying, hey, can we turn on these areas? We always take a look at it. It's not like we just, we listen and hear to every one of our drivers, complaints, compliments, concerns, questions. That's why I'm taking this. That's why I'm doing this podcast.
Sure. Yeah. And again, we've talked about that before. The accessibility has been, just unbelievable. It's not what you expect once you've been in the gig economy. So again, just kudos to you guys on that.
Thanks. Thank you.
What's your biggest challenge when it comes to using independent contractors, do you think?
I'd say reliability.
Okay.
It's because I don't care if you're DoorDash, us, it's the same pool of people. I mean, it's the same people that are on these platforms. It's just we do a better job on educating them how to do pre-scheduled catering delivery the best. We just are a driver-centric platform. So it's the same pool of people. They weed themselves out very, very easily, but I would say reliability. We get, like I said, we get hundreds of drivers on our platform, like almost every day, that we onboard. And, they all quickly weed themselves out if they're bad. So
how, what kind of things, I guess, do you see as far as how does that happen? I guess drivers kind of weeding themselves out.
When they get onboarded, they have to abide by our terms. And if they violate those terms, they're off the platform. They don't get second chances with us. Like I said, we have the necessary things in place. So if you don't, you're a contractor, you're not an employee of ours. So if we come to an agreement, as stated in the terms and in the IC agreement, you guys actually sign with us. If you guys don't live up to those expectations, you're gone.
Sure.
Because you're doing a disservice to everyone else on the platform. You're doing a disservice to the drivers on the platform. You're giving them a bad name. And this is why third-party delivery in the first place has gotten a bad rap.
Sure.
Because a lot of the drivers, they don't take it seriously. They don't take it, like it's a real job. It's a real way to make money.
Well, and you talked about, you mentioned that earlier that, you go into some places and they don't treat you well. And I'm convinced that a lot of the reason isn't because these restaurant people are evil. It's because they've been beat up by some bad drivers out there.
They've had terrible experiences, man. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, we view it, man, like, you get a fresh slate when you come on board. We give you all the tools to succeed. We give you the resources. We give you people. If you have a bad delivery experience, like I said, there's a hotline. You have a dedicated driver account rep you can call and vent to and have a conversation with. So, again, these are things we've learned by taking deliveries and being a platform by drivers for drivers.
Sure.
This stuff is necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that the one thing I hear, just a lot of independent contractors out there that, they cling to that. We're independent contractors. It means we don't have a boss or something like that. And they kind of take that to mean we can do anything we want and we can do it the way we want it. And they forget about the fact that they're running a business. And I've run businesses outside of doing delivery, and I can tell you, there's no way you could do that. If you go in with that kind of attitude, you're going to lose all your customers.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a contractor and you go in with that mentality that you can just walk on water and you can do whatever you want, you're not going to be successful. I don't care what you say or do. I mean, people are going to give you bad reviews. The platforms aren't going to keep you on. It's a privilege. It's not a right to be a gig economy.
It is. You're running a business, and
you got to treat. Yeah, you have to treat it like a business.
You do.
You have to treat it exactly like that. It's your business.
Yeah, I think that's the only way that you can really make it in the gig economy is you take that attitude. That's my opinion. Mm-hmm. So, since you do catering, kind of one last thing or something like that, just so people have an idea when the opportunities are. That usually means then that most of your opportunities are going to be during the rush hours, the lunch, maybe sometimes the dinner hours or something like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do a lot of, so the predominantly the majority of all of our deliveries are between that 10 a.m. and 1 p.m., local time. Mm-hmm. Between 15 and 20% of our deliveries are breakfast and dinner time deliveries. And then you've got, a small percentage, I'm talking like 1 to 2% that are sprinkled in during the off hours. You might have a graduation party that's eaten at 2:00. That's an example I could give you. But no, if you want to make good money, during that 10 to 1,
that's your best opportunity right there.
Yeah, definitely give us a look.
Okay. That sounds, yeah. And that's, that's the biggest thing, is just trying to figure out the times that work. You ever get very much on weekends at all?
Oh yeah. I mean, okay. It's dependent on the market, but
sure.
Hell yeah, man. We get a lot of weekend deliveries.
Football parties.
Yep. Yeah. And the weekend deliveries, that's definitely spread out throughout the day. Those aren't just breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's spread out because there's obviously different events. I mean, you're talking about during the weekdays, it's more of the corporate type settings. You're delivering to hospitals, doctors' offices, office buildings, boardrooms, schools, that kind of stuff.
Now, you guys, you talked about you don't really rely as heavily on the technology because most of the other guys, essentially what they do is they kind of assign a delivery to you and you accept or reject a delivery at a time. You tend to kind of put that out there as available, and just whoever grabs that delivery or that option or something like that is the one that gets that. Does that sound about right?
Hey,
with that,
like I had said before, we're a platform. I'll keep saying it over and over and over again. Platform by drivers for drivers. When we investigated and drove on the other apps, that's exactly what would happen. I would get assigned orders I don't want to take. Yep. So why not give the contractor, you guys, hey, pick what you want, man, whatever. Yep. And we might suggest certain things to you, like, hey, this delivery can go with this delivery, can go with this delivery. So that can actually maximize your earnings. You can take it if you want. You don't have to take it, but we're never assigning orders to drivers. That's not what we do.
Yeah. And that was something I kind of actually appreciated, because it's kind of more like you could choose which ones make sense. Now you got to be the first one to choose on those good deliveries.
I'll go back to my piece on the technology. Okay. What I meant was, we're not a tech company. We're not producing software that you would deem Microsoft as a technology company. You would deem Apple, not only just hardware, but they're a tech company. We know we need good technology to make it easier on our driver partners. So yes, I mean, we do have some internal technology that we have built. We do have a couple outsourced engineers and software developers. But when I say, we're not a tech-centric company, that's how we're able to put more money into your guys' pockets and actually pay you guys more, because we don't have the overhead that a tech company typically would.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I love, and I think sometimes you work with some of the same companies as DoorDash or some of the others, but I kind of love the fact that it's like, with you, this is one of the things I was leading into. I don't have to jump through all the hoops to be able to get those opportunities, to where with DoorDash, it's kind of like you got to accept a certain percentage, things like that. And then, maybe you might get a chance at one or two of these drive orders that are out there or something. And then sometimes you get them and it's like they didn't have a tip or anything like that. So it's hit or miss with those companies as it is. Do you guys, when you mention that, or when we talk about the way that you have it so that it's like you just put the whole list out there, I can fire up my app right now and I can see all sorts of deliveries. And I remember one day I saw in Boulder 4 different offers, or 4 different deliveries that were out there on the same day that were all going to the same place. And I'm just thinking, maybe I should drive to Boulder for this. But it's like, what happens if that doesn't get picked up? And does that happen very often for you? Do you have trouble like keeping all your orders fulfilled? What happens in those situations?
No, we've made so to answer it very on point. No, we've built this company by fulfilling deliveries at a very high capacity. So what typically happens when there's deliveries that are uncovered up to a certain amount of time is we actually do incentives, you could say, that we'll actually pay more on those deliveries just to get them covered. But ultimately, it's up to the driver, and we make that clear with the restaurants and marketplaces that we work with that contract us and say, hey, listen, we can't make people take deliveries. we can't make them fulfill these deliveries. So if this goes unassigned, you need to have a backup option, a secondary option, whatever you want to call it, a delivery rescue program that way that order can at least get fulfilled.
Okay.
Because when we're talking about who we work with, our number one priority with the restaurants and marketplaces isn't us taking the delivery. It's making sure that their delivery gets taken and their customer is happy. Because again, we work for the restaurants and marketplaces, and we also work for you guys. That's how we view it. So it's got to be a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I have to say too, it's like my experience so far as a driver has been, I think it backs that up. That it's, some of that goes back to that personal touch. Some of that goes back to, just the fact that you guys are there to take care of us. And I appreciate that. We go back to something that you said, that a lot of drivers prefer not to have any interaction. And I'm probably one of those drivers, but then when you need it, you definitely want to have it, and so all those things that I really do feel like you kind of take care of us pretty well with that. And one last, go ahead.
We give our drivers the opportunity to opt out of all communication with, that kind of stuff. If you don't want to be reached out to about deliveries, you can opt out of that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Again, being a platform by drivers for drivers, we realize that sometimes, we can inundate you guys with resources and support, and, a lot of veteran drivers, a lot of drivers that have been driving for a while with us, they don't need that stuff. They don't need their hand essentially held, is, be the phrase I would use. So you can opt out of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, actually, right as you said that, I had a text come in and said, "Hey, there's a special delivery opportunity up here," or something like that. And it's actually, I prefer that. I'd rather have the options to get that information, and I can ignore it, and I don't have to, and I don't feel bad about ignoring it. You guys never make me. I never feel pressured. I get a lot of communication from you. I get a lot of texts from you. And I do know that, you can opt out of those things, but I get a lot of texts from you about different opportunities that come up. But at the same time, I don't get this feeling like, you're pressuring me or you're trying to force me into it or anything like that. And that's huge as an independent contractor.
We're just trying to let you guys know, hey, there's a delivery available. If you want it, grab it. If you don't want it, no problems. Sure. Either you want to make 30, 40, 50 bucks on this delivery or you don't. And if your schedule permits it and you want to do it, by all means.
One last question I want to ask you, and this is a little bit different area, but in relation to things like, I want to say the situation out in California right now with Prop 22 and AB 5, PRO Act, them trying to push it through in the Congress and everything like that. Where do you see things going with all of that? Some of the pressure to try and force the employee relationship.
I'll tell you this right now, okay? And this is for our business particularly. If we made our drivers employees, it would actually hurt their income potential. It would actually drastically affect what they make. Just because we're not giving you guys deliveries for 8 hours. You're working for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. So you guys would actually end up making less. So that's where we sit. We put the necessary pieces in place to make sure that, you guys are not classified as employees under any circumstance. We've got a great legal team that, believe and we believe that, you guys are in a good spot as contractors, especially with DeliverThat. Where do I see this going as an industry as a whole? There needs to be a different sort of classification for a gig worker. They're not an employee and they're not truly an independent contractor. There needs to be, a middle ground that's met. And that's where I see this.
I guess here's my thought on a lot of that. And it's like, ultimately, a lot of problems could be solved if there were more accessibility with the bigger companies.
What do you mean?
Just, it is like, okay, so, with DoorDash and Uber Eats or all these companies, you get a lot of people that, either they get warnings or they get they get their accounts paused or deactivated, no word about it or anything like that. And they can't get a hold of anybody, you know? And so there's no,
Doesn't that just make you mad? That pisses me off, just being a driver, man.
Yeah. And it all goes back to that whole trying to manage by algorithm and by trying to avoid any kind of man hours related to what you're doing. And I suppose probably with their profitability model, they kind of have to do it that way to keep their costs down. But yeah, it is. And it is one of the big problems with it, because it is like when something like that happens, there's nobody you can talk to or anything like that. And I honestly think that if you had a little more maybe personal attention or something like that in those situations, that would solve a lot of the problems that are out there in a lot of these situations.
Well, I mean, hey, that's what we're trying to solve. That exact issue is that we're trying to be the resource and the voice for the drivers, for you guys.
And I think the other issue that I see a lot of times is kind of that overstepping the bounds with a lot of the companies, especially the bigger companies out there. And I've seen a couple pretty small ones that are maybe haven't figured it out yet or something like that, where they're still trying to get employees while paying for contractors. It's kind of the way I look at it. And so they're going to try and control you a little bit more or something like that. And so, and I think that's another area where I think an approach similar to yours is probably going to be solve a lot of problems with it. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see where all of that goes, especially the politics and stuff like that. And
I'm going to put some money on it, but I'm more than confident that you're going to get a different classification for the gig economy worker here within the next year or two. It's just too big of an industry. It's too big of an economy that too many people make good money on the gig economy that, it might actually hurt more people being classified as employees, than the contrary. So.
Oh, I agree with you completely. I have always said that, everybody wants to say, okay, XYZ company is terrible, so they should be forced to hire employees. And I'm kind of like, okay, but if this company is so terrible, what makes you think that all of a sudden they're going to become this model employer? It's like, I would rather have them as my customer than as my boss. And so,
yeah,
that's the way
for sure.
Well, Aaron, I want to thank you again for taking the time and joining us. And any last thing that you want to let us know before we sign off?
Absolutely. If you're a driver out there, if you're, driving with us on a different platform, just know that DeliverThat is going to be your voice. We're fighting for drivers. We're fighting for the best opportunities for you guys. I'm a driver. Everyone at DeliverThat as a company, all of our employees are drivers at heart. So if you're listening to this, just know that, you've got someone on your side. You've got a platform that's on your side. So, but Ron, I really appreciate the time. I enjoyed our discussion and look forward to, seeing it live.
Yeah. We look forward to getting this up and running and everything like that. And once again, just thanks for joining us, and best of luck for everything that's happening further down the line for DeliverThat.
Thank you.
Well, my friends, what did you think? I want to just thank Aaron one more time for taking the time to join us and for just sharing a lot about DeliverThat and how things are done, some of the philosophy behind it. And I got to tell you that I've had generally a positive experience with DeliverThat. I think there are a lot of things I like. And, I will tell you that almost every delivery I've had is paid between $25 and $30. So there's like this guarantee that you're going to get a reasonable amount of money for a delivery. I like the fact that there is a personal touch. I love the fact that there are people on the other end of that app, because I think one of the biggest problems with the big three is that when there's an issue, you either can't get a hold of anybody at all, or the people that you do get a hold of are working for an overseas call center, and they're not even employees of DoorDash, Uber Eats, or Grubhub, or whoever. They're employees of that call center, and so they haven't been empowered to really take care of your issue in most cases. And so that's I think something that really sets them apart. I think because they're big offers, they can tend to pay pretty good. The flip side is you got to kind of be careful not getting too sucked in by those $25 to $30 deliveries. And here's what I mean by that, because those deliveries will take longer. With catering orders, in most cases, you're having to set it up. You got to go in, you got to take the food out of the bags and just, mostly it's just lay it out. It's not extensive. Erin said in the interview that she could expect usually about 45 minutes for that pay. And I would say that that's accurate, but not accurate. What I mean by this is 45 minutes from the moment you arrive at the restaurant or from your start time on a delivery because it's scheduled to when you finish that delivery. And that I would say is accurate. I don't know if I've ever seen one go more than that with that time frame. The flip side of that is there's more time involved in that, just like any other delivery. Your time on deliveries is not just the time from the time you arrive at a restaurant, it is from the moment you accept. And now with scheduled, it's a little different than from the moment you accept, but you got to consider that you're going to have dead time ahead of time. It might take you 45 minutes, but it could be an hour and a half that you're not making money with anybody else because of that commitment to that, because you're not taking a delivery ahead of time so that you don't end up missing your start time, right? Or because of the drive time or different things like that. So I think there's the good and the bad with that as far as the pay. And the other side of that is that these deliveries are almost all happening at times when things are the busiest with the other platforms. And so generally, I'm probably making a little bit more per hour on my deliveries for DoorDash, Grubhub, and Uber Eats. That's just me, where I am. There are some places where it's kind of like, no, you know what? This might be the best way. But this is the reason that I guess I look at delivery as a portfolio type of thing. I look at it as, well, basically it's a gig economy thing. And what I mean by that is it is a delivery by delivery by delivery thing. And I'm agnostic as to who I'm delivering for. I'm going to deliver the best delivery that comes along at that given time. And if that best delivery is DoorDash, then it's DoorDash. And if that best delivery offer right at the time is DeliverThat, even in spite of maybe some of that extra time, then I'm doing that DeliverThat order. There's a couple places that are pretty close to where I live that have some fairly regular catering orders. And so if I get one of those and it's just a few minutes away and I'm planning on starting my day right away with that, it's like that is the perfect delivery to take. And I think that that's where I really feel like this is the way to look at something like this, is that they're an option. They're not the option. In fact, if you listen to Aaron, he doesn't want to be considered the option. Now, here's one difference that I would see between DeliverThat and DoorDash. There are some deliveries on DeliverThat that I would call them a stinker, but it's because they would take so much time for me to do, generally because maybe I'm so far away from them and maybe I'd have to do a lot of deadhead back time that I can't make any money anywhere else. So ultimately, I'm not making very much money on that. There are a lot of deliveries on DoorDash and Uber Eats and Grubhub that are really bad deliveries. And the difference being is they're going to be a bad delivery for whoever takes them, because I'm sorry, $3 for a 10-mile trip is never a good delivery. I don't see those stinkers like that on DeliverThat. It may not be the best delivery for me, but it doesn't mean that it's not a good delivery for somebody who's right in that area. And so I really feel like they're a good option for somebody, especially when you take that philosophy that what I'm doing is running a business delivery by delivery by delivery. So with that in mind, I don't take a high percentage of orders with DeliverThat, even with that $25 to $30 price tag. But the ones that I do, I've been satisfied with. Some of those, I get done and I realize I probably could have made a little bit more on somebody else, but it's never been where it was so bad that it was like, yeah, I definitely would have made more with somebody else. You see where I'm going with that? So, and I think that that's a good place to be. And that's something that makes them a good option to have along with everybody else. Now, there's a few things I don't like as well about them. I don't like how they do their app. He mentioned they're not a technology company and they don't just like send an order to you. What they do is they just put the orders out there. And then it's kind of like everybody can see those orders, and then it's just a first come, first serve. But a lot of times you don't know exactly what you're getting on a delivery. And it varies by the different type of delivery. Although even then, like I said, my deliveries have been very consistent, almost always between $25 and $30. But you get all the offers and you see where they're going and where you're picking up. You see all that, but you don't see what the pay is. You have to actually go into it and see the details and all the different stuff like that. The good news is you can turn it down right away and put it back out in the pool. So with DeliverThat, it's kind of like fishing, it's catch and release until maybe eventually you catch the good one. I do know there are a lot of people that probably don't like them because it's easy to get deactivated. If you are late, if you are unprofessional, if you look like crap or you smell like crap when you bring in hundreds of dollars worth of food, there's a good chance you may never deliver for DeliverThat again. And personally, I don't have a problem with that. Probably my biggest, I don't know if it's a beef, but it's something that is very different than what you see in the rest of the delivery world, and it is how they handle tips, in particular with deliveries for ezCater. They're a big contractor with ezCater. They'll pick up a lot of orders for them. Now, if you've delivered for Doordash and you've done their drive orders, you're very familiar with ezCater because that's a big one for them as well. But one thing you probably notice on Doordash is that sometimes the tip can be really incredible. And there are a lot of times where there's no tip at all. And so what DeliverThat has done is they pool the tips. So they just take all of the tips that come from ezCater and then they just divide them out by delivery. So every delivery gets the same tip for that particular day. And some people hate that because they want to get that bigger delivery or something. And I can see it both ways. And honestly, I guess it's kind of like the way I look at a lot of deliveries for everybody else, that it's like, I know what it is going into it. And if I accepted it anyway, then I'm okay with that. Right. And if I don't like it, then I just don't accept ezCater orders. That's kind of my philosophy around that particular one. Now, I think the wonkiest thing that I see that's just different enough from what I've seen anybody else do in this space or in the gig economy is that they can actually charge you for certain things. If you miss a delivery where it's like no call, no show, and nothing's been done about that, and all of a sudden this food has been sitting there and can't be delivered, you can be charged $100. Well, it's costing them a heck of a lot more money than that. So I understand that in some ways, but it is very different than what we're used to seeing in this world. And if you're extremely late, there can be a charge on that. And so, I don't know what to feel about that, to be honest. There's a piece where I'm like not comfortable with it, but there's a part where I understand it. But I will tell you that I'm not worried about ever being charged, because the thing for me is catering orders, that's a high stakes type of thing. Companies are spending hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars on the food that you're taking out there. And so it's a bigger deal if something gets really screwed up than it is for a $15 Chipotle order. And so, and so if I'm going to take an order that, first of all, it's going to pay more, I can understand when the standard is a little bit higher. And honestly, I feel like we ought to have the professionalism that we're going to show up on time and we are going to do a delivery that we committed to, especially at that level. But I do think, that's the one thing that's just different enough that, I don't know. Here's the bottom line. You're never going to get there. DeliverThat is not the perfect platform. There is no such thing as the perfect platform. I will continue to use them, but it'll be time to time. It won't be, sometimes it'll be super consistent and sometimes it's going to be a long time between deliveries. And I'll continue to find good deliveries with them. And I'll continue to see a lot of deliveries that, they offer me some deliveries that are like 100 miles away. I'm not taking those. They could be $100. I'm not taking those. And so, I don't notice as many abject stinkers. I don't see the $3 10 mile orders. But I don't see as many unicorns either. It's kind of steady. And to me, it's kind of like you find the one that fits well, that is close enough to you that you can kind of fit in within everything else. And those can be really good orders. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. I think if they're in your market, I really encourage you to give them a try at least. And again, do it Don't do it as they're the only ones. Don't do it where you're going to focus heavily on DeliverThat during the catering time or during the delivery times and then switch over to everybody else. What I would tell you to do is you find the best delivery from whatever the platform is for whatever the time is. And if it's DeliverThat, grab it. And if there's a great one on Uber Eats, grab it. You know what I'm saying? Pay very close attention to all of the different things that as you're doing them, so you kind of know the environment you're working in. And I think that they can be a great option. They're one more piece. They're one more weapon that you can use to earn money for you. Now, you can use my referral link in the show notes at entrecourier.com/DeliverThat and sign up there. I'll also have, like I said, the links in the show notes and everything like that. Give them a shot and then let me know how it's working for you. I would love to hear your thoughts and your feedback on what DeliverThat is like. So, my friends, that kind of wraps up today's episode. And I give you a heads up, next week, there probably won't be an episode. As it looks right now, we're going out of town for a few days and just things are going to be so busy and so whacked out that I'm not going to have a chance to be able to put up an episode before heading out. And at the same time, things could change. So just keep an eye out, and maybe something will drop and maybe something won't. It probably won't. We're probably 2 weeks out until our next episode. But in the meantime, my friends, I really encourage you to think about things like DeliverThat, but do it on your terms. Do it in your philosophy. Do it in a way where you're looking at what works for you and run your business as you see fit. Take control and be the boss.